All right, Friday night, time once again for one of our Friday live chats here at the Paranormal Network, both on Facebook and YouTube. Paranormal Network manager Jason Hewlett here with, and also sometimes paranormal investigator myself, joined by Patrick Meekin, author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street. I keep wanting to say Fear Street for some reason, Patrick. I'm not really sure why. Our subject tonight, and it ties directly into the work that Patrick's done, is demonic hauntings. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the program.
Well, I've been excited about this because you and I are both Beyond the Fray authors. So it's kind of a
Hmm.
chance for us to meet for the first
Yeah.
time and talk about, obviously, we're both passionate about the paranormal,
Hmm.
but your books deal with a very specific kind of haunting, which some call negative, some call demonic. Could you kind of explain, I guess, in a nutshell, both stories, Patrick, and how you became involved with them?
Yes, I was kind of thrown into this whole field, like thrown into the deep end and had to learn how to swim. Um, I was, brought up in a Christian home, always was in church growing up, and I knew these things existed, never planned on experiencing it to the level that I did. I ended up having two houses back to back that were the hauntings were completely unrelated. Both houses were haunted. The second house, a lot of times people will ask me, well, how do you know something didn't follow you from the first house? And the answer is, well, the deliverance or exorcism on the first house was successful for one reason, but another very good reason, and even better reason, is because that house, the second house, was haunted before I was born.
Oh,
There were events that occurred in that house, well before I was born. And there are, stories of long before me being there, of the house being haunted. So basically what happened to me, me and my ex-wife bought a piece of land in Holmes County, Ohio in late 2001 and built what we thought was going to be our dream home. And it turned out to be literally a nightmare. The house was very haunted, which did not make sense to me at the time because we built it. How can it be haunted? It's a new home. But that haunting went on for, from the time the house was complete in 2002 all the way until we did if you want to call it an exorcism on the house and property in late 2009, in December of 2009. And at that point, all the activity stopped and the house sold. Now, I had had the house on the market for 2 years and 10 months, which in this housing market right now, that's almost unheard of. But the housing market really tanked at that time. But also, nothing I did, I could not get the house to sell. And I went through a divorce during that time. A lot of times in these environments, families are torn apart because evil spirits know where I'm weak, they know where everybody else is weak, and they turn people against each other. So it really does ruin relationships. And if anybody has any pre-existing issues of any kind, they're going to be exploited.
what
And
if I could ask, what was sort of the activity that you encountered in Holmes County? Like what was going on in the house? Oh, and one of the other questions we got is from Eric here is, was it built on an Indian burial ground that you're aware of?
that's a very good question. It was built on land that was owned by Indians in the 1700s. I mean, it was their land long before that, up till the 1700s, like after the Greenville Treaty. So it was. I know there were battles fought on the land. I believe wholeheartedly people were killed on the land, even murders possibly, but the battles were fought and people died there. So those were all bad issues. There was a lot of problems going back to the American Indians that lived on that land originally. So that was a very good question. But there were other issues as well, and people don't know this generally, but it's becoming more and more known. But sadly, a lot of the Amish community is heavily involved in witchcraft and sorcery. And if they are, and they happen to want your land and they view you as an outsider, which they did me, they're going to direct their cursing towards you. That was a real issue I had to deal with. And that's very, very negative. But as far as experiences in the house, I mean, it was a little bit of everything. It was horrible, you know. One of the first experiences that just really, well, first of all, the house blew over after it was completely framed up, 2 stories framed up, and I believe it was March of 2002. So about this time of the year, actually, funny, you know, I hadn't thought about that till just now, but the
Interesting.
house, yeah, a storm came through, the entire house blew over, flat, completely flattened. So the builder had to start over. And, you know, is that just a natural disaster or is there more to it? You know, makes you wonder when by the time you get to the end of the story, you really start wondering, you know, was that an omen of things to come, you know? But it got to the point where, you know, one day after the house was built and, you know, I thought things were going pretty decent. And I'm standing in what we called a mud room. It was a laundry room where you came out of the garage, walked in, there was a room with a utility tub, a washer, dryer, and a closet. And that's where we fed our cats and everything. And when you walked out of that room, you walked into the great room, which was like a living room with a vaulted ceiling, and it was a big open area because about half of the first floor was completely open from that great room over into it like a dining area with a sunroom and then into the kitchen. So you could stand at one side of the first floor and look all the way over to the other side for about half of the first floor. And I'm standing in the mudroom and the dryer door opens by itself. And I'm like, I never heard of a dryer door opening by itself. They latch shut pretty tight, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought it was strange, but it got weirder, you know. Later, another night, I was standing in the same room. We had at that time we had just gotten a kitten named Zoe. She was a calico, and we had Moses, and Moses was a big tabby cat, you know, gray white with dark stripes, a big tabby cat though. And I'm standing in the mudroom. My wife at that time, she's upstairs in bed. And I thought, well, before I go to bed, I'm going to put some food in the dish. You know, I probably overfed the cats, but, you know, didn't want them to be hungry. So I put some food in the dish. And Zoe, this little calico kitten, runs into the room and runs over to the dish and starts eating. And I thought, you know, how cute. I looked right at her and I thought, how cute. I put the bag of food in the closet, walked out of the room, left her in there eating, walked through the house into the foyer, walked through the foyer, turned to go upstairs, and Zoe was sitting on the top step staring at me like she had been there for a while.
Really?
And I thought, that's impossible. So then I convinced myself, well, that had to have been Moses that came into the mud room and started eating. It had to be because it can't be Zoe. She's here, you know? So I walked up the stairs, walked past Zoe across the landing, opened the bedroom door to find Moses was sleeping on the bed with my ex-wife. So I was like, okay, that's crazy. That's impossible. So I had to tell her, I had to tell my ex-wife about it. You know, of course, we were still married then. And I kept thinking, man, I don't want her to think I'm crazy. I have to tell her this. So when I told her, I explained what happened. And she said, oh, don't even tell me that. Don't even tell me that. And I thought the next words were going to be, I'm married to a crazy person, you know? And she said, there are times when you're at work and I'm home alone and I'm downstairs on the elliptical and I will see Moses run past out of the corner of my eye. And I think there's Moses. And then I instantly remember he's upstairs. We don't even allow him in the basement. And, you know, so at that point I was like, okay, there's more to this, you know, this wasn't even like a random event. By the time, you know, the divorce happened, it was like all the activity escalated even worse. And at that point, I'm there by myself, just went through a divorce, which is, you know, traumatic, emotionally traumatic to go through that, you know. So I'm ripe for the pickings, you know, and the activity in the house just escalated after that, you know, and it went to the point of, I mean, I actually saw like a black mass pass right through the room. When I saw it, my cats, I saw it to my right pass through the room. When I saw that, I was looking straight ahead when it happened. and I could see out of my peripheral vision that through the right eye, I saw this black mass pass through the room. And at the same time, out of my left periphery, I saw both of my cats look up and look from right to left. They followed it. They saw it too. So I was like, okay, this is not good. That was black. That's definitely bad. The environment was just very heavy and very negative. It was a kind of thing where, like, if I didn't have my faith, if I didn't have my religious beliefs, it would have been, I could totally understand someone who didn't becoming suicidal in that environment, because it really messed with me. And I was able to just barely hang on sometimes, but I was able to do that. But through these experiences, I kept studying, how do I deal with this? I want this to end. I want to, sell this house. I want to move on. I want the haunting to stop. And as I studied, I started, running across people that had demonic issues themselves. So I felt like I was kind of thrown into the deep end with that too, but I was able to do some exorcisms, if you will, casting demons out of people. And it sounds crazy when you go home at the end of the day and you're like, okay, how did I just cast, 17 demons out of a person, but I can't cast them out of this house? And now I'm laying here in this house by myself. And I'm sure there's a lot of demonic spirits that are not happy with me for helping somebody else. And I'm laying here in an environment that I can't really seem to help myself. And there were a lot of nights of sleeping flat on my back with my Bible open on my chest, because that was the only thing that gave me peace, And but the activity just got worse and worse and worse. But there were times, you would hear somebody ringing the doorbell,
which we talked about before the show. Yeah.
Yeah. There was nobody there. I had guests at the house. I started teaching guitar lessons. I had 3 people sitting in my front living room at the front of the house. So we're right by the front door, and I'm showing them how to play guitar. And they're all, look, I heard a noise, but I couldn't tell what I heard because I was playing the guitar. And I looked up at them, and they were all looking at me funny. And I said, what? And they said, are you going to go get your door? And I said, was that the doorbell? And they said, yeah. I walked straight over to the door, walked out on the porch. No one. There was no one there at all. It got to the point where there was things started moving in the house by themselves. Here's the thing, aside from the paranormal just downright being creepy and it scares you. Aside from that, when you're in that environment and you're kind of on the ropes emotionally because you've gone through a traumatic event in your relationship, and then you got to sell this house because now you're paying for the house on one income instead of a married couple paying for it together, and you have all this stress. It was like every time a paranormal event happened, I was being taunted. Like, what, you can't get rid of us. There's nothing you can do. We are going to destroy you. We're going to take everything you own, and there were even times that, I actually had done a deliverance on someone, and I dealt with, in one instance, 19 demonic spirits that person had, that were rooted in Irish curses from that person's ancestry.
Irish?
So, Irish, yes.
Irish. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm Irish, and there's a lot of bad stuff. If you go back to Ireland before, like, St. Patrick was there was a lot of dark, bad stuff there. That the beliefs that people held and the things they did opened doors. And all you got to be as a descendant of that, and they're going to come right down the genealogy to you. That's just how it works. It's a generational curse. So, we had, and like I said, I'm Irish, so I know I've had to deal with things like that myself. But I go home one day, and again, I'm the only one with, my security code for my security system. My mom has a key to my house, but she lives 3 counties away from me. And I go in the house. I thought, well, I'm going to go in and check my email. So I go into my home office, I log in, I go to check my email, and in the username spot, there's already a name typed on my computer. And it said Irish 19. And I was
Did
like,
you,
Irish 19? What? That's not my username. What? And then it hit me, okay, that's a direct reference to that exorcism you did last week. It was very unnerving. I was being taunted, very heavily.
which is what
At
they
one
do,
point,
right? That's what they
which,
do. Like if story every story
yes,
I've read, they once you kind of recognize them, they see you and
yes.
they taunt you. They're trying to drive you, like you said, they try to break people apart or break their spirit down completely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, here's the thing. They know what's going to hurt you. They know what's going to break you down. And when I say you, I'm talking any one of us, and me, certainly, you know, but through a series of events, I mean, the activity that I was experiencing it was creepy. How would you like to, be in the bathroom in the middle of the night in this house? And the house was in the middle of nowhere. I lived in the middle of Amish country. There weren't, there were Amish farms around me. There weren't any houses close to me. And I can't sleep. And it's between 3 and 4 in the morning, which is also interesting. I get
Mhm,
up and I go to the bathroom at the top of the stairs in the foyer. And I'm in the bathroom, and, all the doors were solid oak. And there's only one thing that sounds like knocking on a solid oak door, and that's knocking on a solid oak door. So it wasn't like I mistook what I heard. Out of the blue, plain as day, I heard knock, knock on the bathroom door. And I almost said what? I started to say what, just because it's like a habit. Somebody knocks on the door, you say what? And as I started to say what, I realized, wait a second, you are the only one here. Your cats can't knock on your door. Not like that. That was a loud 2 knocks. And I thought, nobody came in the house. My security system is armed. Nobody has the code but me. My mom, again, 3 counties away from me. And at that point, I started like trying to say it, like spiritual warfare type of prayers and things. And I'm trying to say, I rebuke you in Jesus' name, get out of my house. And I'm literally yelling it because I'm fired up at this point and also extremely scared. But as I'm trying to yell that, all that's coming out is a whisper, because when you have the nightmare and you try to scream and you can't,
mhm.
that's what was happening. But I was awake and I couldn't get it to come out. All that was coming out was a whisper. And the whisper was like, I rebuke you in Jesus' name, but I'm literally yelling, and that's all that's coming out because I am so petrified. So all of these activities just got worse and worse. And there was a series of events in 2009 that, I go into a lot of detail on, that I believe led me down the path to deliverance. And I think some of it was God wanted me to step out in faith and do certain things, so I would know, okay, this is a miracle. This deliverance that I just experienced is a miracle. It is God. It's, I didn't do it. He did it. And multiple things happened. And I ended up coming into contact with an old friend from grade school that I had not talked to in years. And I started to tell her my experiences. And I thought, I'm risking looking crazy, but I don't even care anymore. People that know me know I claim my house is haunted. I know it makes me look crazy, but that's what I'm going through. I talk about it. And other people had experienced things in the house as well. But through that contact with that individual, she says, well, you're in Holmes County. She said, my husband grew up in Holmes County. Where are you at? Where do you live? And I told her, and she said, I think that's really close to where he grew up. Well, as it turned out, her husband had been adopted as a child. He was adopted by an Amish family. He never joined the Amish church, but he was raised by them. So he knew a lot about the land. And as it turned out, he called me back a few days later and he told me all kinds of things about the history of the land. And it ended up going down that the two of them and myself performed an exorcism on the house and property in December and mid to late December of about 2009. And beginning of January, the house, I got contacted by my realtor it feel like I knew when she called me, the tone in her voice and everything. It was like we both knew this, it's selling. And like I said, after all the activity stopped after the exorcism. So I end up moving. So I moved the last week of February 2010. And I'm like, my nightmare is over. And I am writing a book about what I experienced because, man, I just got delivered from something that could have taken me down and destroyed me. And I'm delivered. I'm free from that now. And I need to write this book. I need to share this and help others. And, so I start to write Nightmare in Holmes County in the new house I moved into,
which would be 220,
which was 225th Street.
It's the second book.
Yeah. And began having experiences at 225th Street. And it started out, I would tell people, like people I was close to, the girl I was dating at that time. And I remember telling her oldest son and her, we were eating pizza one night in a restaurant. And I said, look, I'm sure this house isn't haunted, but listen to what happened. And I told him a very eerie experience that I had. And, I would always, before I shared some of the early experiences I had, I would always say, I'm sure it's not haunted because how could I possibly live in two haunted houses back to back, But as it turned out, I'm writing Nightmare in Holmes County, sitting in the office in that house upstairs. And I keep having experiences. I mean, I'm talking very creepy experiences. And my neighbor, and I told my mom, I said, I'm sure that this house can't be haunted. And I know nothing followed me from Holmes County, but man, something's not right here, Well, about the beginning of March, my neighbor comes over one day and introduced himself. And then on the next day or 2 days later, it's a Sunday afternoon. And my mom, my sister, and my brother-in-law stopped to see me. And they all ended up playing a very large role in my time at 225th Street too. But he comes back over. In the book, I named him Steve. That's not his real name. I've changed names just out of respect because I don't want other people to be scrutinized the way I am for making these claims, But he comes over and we're talking, and he said, you're welcome in this town. You need help with anything, you let me know. He's being very friendly and welcoming. And he said, I said, well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And he said, well, that's the good news. Now for the bad news. And I knew exactly what he was going to say. And I said, you're going to tell me my house is haunted. And he said, yeah, man, it is. Some dude killed himself in your basement a long time ago. And I was like, I turned around and I looked at my mom and I said, I told you so. And she's like, you did. And then my sister's chiming in, what's he talking about? Not again, because I just came out of that other house, So it's kind of comical to think about it now, but it wasn't funny at all at the time, But I told Steve, I said, you know what? I know how to deal with this. I'll deal with it. I'll be fine, And that's what I thought, But at that moment, I knew, when Steve walked back home, and I knew I am to put Nightmare in Holmes County on the back burner. That book is to be written second, even though it was the first of the two houses. It is to be a prequel. And a book about this house has to be written first. And I have to put all my energy into researching this haunting and my experiences as I continue living here. And I know it was like it was downloaded right to my mind. The title of this book is the address, 225th Street. And so I began investigating at that point. And, over time, I just kept finding these families that had lived in the house. And every one of the families that was there before me sold the house to someone else and never told them that they thought it was haunted. As it turned out, there had been a suicide in the basement of the house in 1958. They all knew it when they sold it. Nobody ever told them, the other buyers, that. They all just moved and kind of got out of there. So as I'm talking to these other former tenants and owners and whatnot, their stories are all similar, but they haven't talked to each other about it. They haven't really told anybody, but they all kind of wanted to get it off their chest. And I was like the perfect person to talk to because I'm living there and, I'm contacting them and asking them. So they knew as soon as I contacted them and said, hey, I'm buying this house. Did you ever have strange things happen when you lived there? They knew this guy's having experiences and I can trust him to tell him what I experienced, and
Because
they
people
all
are
were
comfortable, right? Once you want, and I find that in this field, if you're open and to talking about other people, will a lot of people have experiences they want to talk
yes.
to you about it and get it off their chest. Just in the interest of time, Patrick, how did you resolve that issue at the house? Did you finally move out, or did you were able to kind of perform an exorcism there again and bring this to a close, or how did that play out?
No, we attempted an exorcism. I had limited information about the suicide and even where it happened or anything at the time we attempted an exorcism. When we attempted the exorcism, it did not go well. I knew at that point, I mean, we made a valiant effort to cleanse that house and it did not work. So I knew, okay, there's secrets here. There's things I do not know, and there's a legal right, and for this spirit to be here, and what a legal right is. It's real simple. Certain events open doors. Certain things that happen open doors to demonic spirits, and they give them a legal right to be there. And suicide is a big one. Murder is
Mhm.
another one. There any kind of playing with witchcraft things like that in the house. There's all kinds of things that open doors, but suicide is a bad one. And I believe there was more than that. But uh, basically, I did not know enough information. There was a reason, and there certainly was a legal right for the spirits to stay in that house at that time. I just didn't know what it was. So as time wore on, I came to the conclusion as I did more and more research, and I'm living there and I'm having all these experiences that line up with these other people's experiences, and they're sharing their stories and I'm still living there. So I'm like, yeah, I'll sleep real good tonight. Thank you. But, but I came to the conclusion, every day when I walk down the stairs and into the kitchen and then down to the basement, I'm thinking that on March 1st, 1958, the gentleman that built this house walked this same path with a gun in his hand and went to the root cellar and killed himself. And I was like, no, even if I get this house cleansed, I'm never going to be able to deal with that. That's going to bother me every day. I'm going to think about that. That's just the way I think. And I went back. I was buying the house from a realtor who was flipping it. And he was kind enough. He had let me move in while we were waiting for my mortgage to close. And it hadn't closed yet. So I went back to him and I said, look, I'll pay you rent for the time that I've been here until that time I find another house. But I said, I'm not staying here. And I said, number one, you didn't tell me that there was a suicide. You didn't tell me that there was rumors that it was haunted. And he denied knowing either.
Mm.
Neighbors of the house told me he did. Either way, he was kind enough to let me back out of the purchase. I bought another house that he was selling that wasn't one he was flipping. But I moved out, wrote to 25th Street, and the experiences continued. I continued having things happen. As I was interviewed, things would happen even during the interviews. Things happened while I was writing the book. Lots of activity in my current house while I was writing the book. And then, fast forward to 2020, I was contacted by Beyond the Fray Publishing about republishing both books. And I said, well, yeah, I would love to do that. But I think I need to continue where I left off. There's activity that's continued, and I think I should share that. And they agreed. So at that point, I started, going back and researching everything again and found out, man, the activity has continued. People who live in that house, it follows them. And that was one of the things that a lot of the people who lived there would ask me when I was interviewing them in 2010. They would say, could what's there follow me? And I would say, yeah, absolutely it can. And now, looking back this many years later, it has followed multiple people. And there's been consequences that I'm including death
Mhm.
that I believe are directly linked to the house. So it is that serious. When you're talking a demonic haunting, you're talking a spirit that is very, very powerful, very, very smart because they've been around forever. And my view on them is they're fallen angels. They're very intelligent, very powerful, and they, they're going to try to destroy anyone they come in contact with. So that's kind of what all that information is in the second edition. The current editions out are the second edition of both books. Both books continue the activity that happened since the first editions were written. There's multiple chapters added to each book, but like I said, it all continues, and to this day it continues.
Well, that's I think an ominous note to end with for now, Patrick.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
appreciate you coming on and sharing all that.
yeah.
It's a lot to digest, definitely. And I guess sort of just as a quick wrap up question, what would you recommend to people who do come in contact with something, a demonic force, a negative force like that, to kind of try to protect themselves as best they can, just as sort of a caution to people?
Pray.
Right?
I mean, if you're talking about a demonic spirit, the opposite of demonic in the devil, the opposite's God. So you're going to need assistance from God. You're going to need potentially angelic assistance. God can send angels. We can ask for for God to send angels to help us. Plead the blood of Jesus. Pray, and Jesus cast out demons constantly. I mean,
Mhm.
literally constantly. And so did the apostles. And, in the Great Commission, that's one of the things he said in his directions he gave right before he went back to heaven after his crucifixion, burial, resurrection. And then he spent a time on earth, and then he went back to heaven, and he gave directions before he did that. And he said, go to the ends of the earth and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. He who believes not shall be damned. And then he said, these signs shall follow those who believe. And guess what? The first sign he said was, in my name, they shall cast out devils. So that's what it all ultimately, to me, that's what everything comes down to, and sometimes you have to find out, another piece of advice is try to find out the history of that place. If you move into a place where there's activity, try to find out the history, because there's probably a reason why it's there. And you're going to want to deal with that legal right, and as part of the casting out what the demonic presence.
Well, I appreciate that, Patrick. And I think Brandy made a comment that it's sad that, real estate agents misrepresent that information. I think there's even in some places clauses where they have to disclose if anything like
Yeah.
that, if hauntings have been reported. So,
Yes.
which is a nice change, because
Yeah,
these
definitely.
places are out there.
Definitely.
Patrick, I want to thank you again for coming. I'd love to have you come back on again, and we could talk more about this
I would
subject.
love
'Cause I think
to.
we could be doing it for hours.
Yeah, I would love to.
I want to thank Brandy, Kelly, Dylan, Laura, and everyone who's commented and liked and everything like that. I'll be back in 2 weeks with more. And Patrick, we'll have you back on here in a couple months for sure.
Thank you. I'd love to. And thank you for having me on tonight.
It's my pleasure. Stay spooky, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks.